It's Thursday, May 29th in 2025, 11 o'clock Central European Time, and this is EuroWars, your independent breakdown of politics and money in the so-called European Union. My name is Paul Brandenburg, coming to you from our studio in Switzerland, and with me from Berlin, Germany, is my anonymous co-host, Herman, to share his 30 years of experience in C-level banking around the globe. Herman, great to have you on the show.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody.
Our headlines today: Muslim migrants continue to cause stabbing bloodbaths across Germany. World War III seems to be the top foreign priority for the European Union. Lawfare against domestic political opposition in Germany escalates, and energy schizophrenia, how Europe's biggest economy is destroying the basis of its wealth. Well, Muslim invaders continue their stabbing bloodbath across Germany, and even state-sponsored tabloid Bild says stabbing violence escalates. There is a general fear of knives. The independent news outlet Apollo says it was a, quote, blood week in Germany in the last week. And state-owned broadcaster RBB gives us these details. A 13-year-old is said to have fatally injured a fellow pupil at Berlin Elementary School. Well, fatally is not correct because he actually made it. He was operated a bit later, but it was suspected to be fatally to begin with. On the 23rd of March, RBB says he was on the run for a day. The 13-year-old is suspected to have injured the 12-year-old classmate during school time on Thursday morning. Crime has taken place in a room in the sports hall of the school, as police quoted on Friday. On the very same day in Germany, an 11-year-old boy injured a 13-year-old boy, again with a knife in Remscheid in western Germany. Both perpetrators are Arabic Muslims. And 2 days before that, another stabbing occurred. The Swiss newspaper Neue Zürcher Zeitung writes, last Sunday a Syrian man stabbed guests in a German bar indiscriminately with a knife. He injured 5 people, 4 of them seriously. The office of the Attorney General is investigating. The police caught the alleged perpetrator. According to reports, he sympathized with the Islamic State and called Allah Akbar while committing these atrocities. Directly after this attack in the Bielefeld, the local bar owner reacted by conducting a demonstration against so-called right extremists and the shift to the right. The state-owned broadcaster WDR says around 300 people from the Alliance Against the Right gathered in front of the bar, not far from the main station, at the scene of the knife attacks under their slogan against hate and agitation in Bielefeld. Herman, the politics of German immigration started in 2015 with Angela Merkel, the present politics, importing mass migrants out of humanitarian reasons at first, and then for so-called economical reasons, because we, quote, rely on these specialists from abroad to support the rather unstable German economy. How would you judge that from your economical point of view?
Well, Paul, it's hard to say really what Europe and especially Germany does to its population, to the society, and also how people interact. I left Germany in 2016 for good, and I migrated because mainly of that I saw basically from day one when the first trains arrived. And I was at Munich train station with my then Australian partner, and she said, I think an army is coming here. So I was very cautious in what that would mean. But also looking at the political discourse in Germany, they just think importing people will solve the demographic and will pay the pensions of today's working society, which is absolutely ludicrous because we are importing or migrating some people here, which are doctors and mainly helpful to our value system, I would say. But the vast majority are basically people looking for a better life, coming to Germany, having absolutely no foundation in terms of contributing to the social system and paying basically in our well-established, society that is basically very responsive and very reliant on the social welfare from the government. And so this is a calculation that from 2015 it was poised to go wrong, because now we are close, or we are getting in the way of 50 billion euros in terms of migration budget that we need to quote, integrate these people. First, they were refugees. So refugees come when there's a political or a war conflict. They come, we give them shelter, we give them something to eat, and then they leave, go back to their countries, which wasn't the case. All of a sudden, Angela Merkel decided all these people should be integrated. And being here in Berlin very frequently, you see parts of the city that I would say more than 50% don't speak a word of German. So the culture is gone, the society togetherness is gone, the way people react to each other, you can see it here, driving around, walking around. The atmosphere has totally changed. And I think, you know, this in itself is a crime. And that's why I'm more than happy to support you in this case in, you know, flagging the world to the outside and say, please, in this case, America, give us back our value system that we used to have, because Germany is a product after the Second World War of the American ideal of free speech and everything what comes with a great constitution.
Well, America's Vice President, J.D. Vance, recently said if you're afraid of your own voters over there in Germany, he addressed Germany and during his Munich speech, said, then there's nothing the United States can do for you. So this cry for help, Herman, is maybe a bit, well, it has been heard, obviously, or this need for help has been seen. But, I mean, the stance of the Trump administration on Germany seems pretty clear when it comes to their recent politics. How the situation within Germany is made pretty clear by the reaction of mainstream media. If we look at this article from Berlin's Berliner Zeitung, a daily, then already in 2024, it was absolutely known that these stabbings that escalated are just mainly done by so-called foreigners. Suspects are usually foreigners, is what Berliner Zeitung wrote back in 2004, and they say this is, quote, not a coincidence. So it has been pretty clear for a long time, but you hear none of this in mainstream media, right? We actually do not have these headlines within the state-funded, state-sponsored, or actually state-owned media, which make up the majority of German media, actually, Herman.
I think this is why the majority of the Germans are media-wise so controlled in their thinking and what they believe, because they've been told AfD is far right and it's extremist and they want to destroy democracy. I can tell you they see J.D. Vance as far right, extreme right. And this shows
Trump,
basically
they see
everything.
Trump as a fascist.
Trump is even above J.D. Vance. I mean, not only in position of government, but also in his rhetoric. And his roots are in Germany, very close to where I come from, where we have a huge American air base as well. And so I grew up with Americans, and I was married to an American, and I lived in New York. So I kind of feel the American dream in the last 4 years under Biden was under threat. And what you've seen with the Democrats, we have it here squared by all the so-called democratic parties. If they call themselves the democratic parties and they exclude one, however you want to see AfD, it's not far right. More than 10 million people in Germany voted for it, and we really have a discussion now if the party should be banished from being in existence. It's just going to an absurd situation where, from an economical point of view, it comes with it. So the economics in Germany look really, really bad. And where are we going clearly is that we focus everything basically on developing anything that we need for defense. We also, under the pressure of Donald Trump, we increased our budget, mainly up to 5% of the German budget should be defense. And on the other side, you see the car manufacturers dying. So Rheinmetall, our biggest defense company, is basically taking over Volkswagen's car manufacturers. And we will build tanks and other stuff in the foreseeable future, because as it is right now, Germany, it's in free fall. So I expect when they plan on 3 years of developing this rearm Europe together with the EU, it might take 5 or 10 years. Let's hope Putin waits that long.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but just for explanation, the AfD you mentioned earlier is the biggest oppositional party in Germany at the moment, with around 20% of the voters just voting for the AfD in the last general election just a few months ago, and is now on the verge of being actually outlawed. And the picture painted by mainstream media is of that kind you were just mentioned. Just for an example, or as an example of how far this delusion or this ability, or actually the effort of mainstream media trying to avoid reality actually goes. Let's take a look at this headline from Germany's biggest tabloid, Bild, which is state-sponsored too, about what they call the surprising revelation of Biden's dementia. Bild here says, advisor and families deceived the world about Biden's condition in the last month. This is a very recent headline there, giving you sort of the official stance of German state-controlled media on the fact that Joe Biden has, for years, quite obviously, been physically and mentally unable to run the country. And this is now considered a revelation by the state media. They are surprised that they try to make people believe that they themselves have been lied to. And this is actually the state of German media it is in right now. Concerning the immigration import of what they call workers, there's a very recent report by the independent journalist Reitschuster about a scandal surrounding the admissions program for so-called local workers from Afghanistan that has been a big issue in Germany. Reitschuster says some of the so-called NGOs that helped to import these so-called migrants have even taken on the role of professional smugglers, or at least aids in abiding illegal entry in Germany. This just has been revealed by internal documents from the German embassy in Islamabad in Pakistan, which, according to Der Spiegel, are now available there. The situation report from spring 2023 states, for example, that Afghans had received falsified and procedurally adapted documents from NGOs in order to board one of the planes to Germany, state-sponsored. In addition to that, they were advised to provide, quote, deviating information, so to lie about their actual family and personal background, when taking part in the mandatory regulated visa process by the local embassy. So, Michael, it seems now that there's evidence actually in Germany available that this constant influx of unqualified and mainly criminal and even murderous invaders has been and still is official government policy and is officially aided by the government on a criminal basis.
Well, let's see what the US did with the great effort of Elon Musk in Doge. The US aid was basically abandoned. So what did all the left NGOs that were funding this kind of strategy around the world, they're moving to Brussels and to Berlin. So we are basically seeing that also official German government policy is now to take some of the funding of US aid out of Germany. So basically what we see is that this is a well-planned effort. And also looking at our former Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, who is now close to being elected as the President of the United Nations, basically.
The General Assembly of the United Nations.
The Federal Assembly, exactly. But she is under investigation, basically, in providing via email the go to many embassies around the world, especially Islamabad, where the embassy workers for Germany warned explicitly the Germans that these are not the kind of people that we want here. And so she did it anyway. And in discussions, especially with the Green Party, where Annalena belongs to, and the Left Party, they always say, oh, if somebody basically does a knife crime, he is, traumatized by his youth, and if we catch him here, why would we remigrate him? Because he's going to be dangerous on the streets of Afghanistan. And that, to us, to normal thinking people, is not that America first can be replicated in Germany first. Let's make sure that our citizens that are here are safe. No, we do quite the contrary. We bring him every day in an unnecessary danger.
So, as this is obviously the actual policy of the German regime, at the same time, because you mentioned America First, it is outlawed in Germany to quote a very similar line to that. We have a couple of Kate courses at the moment because people said everything for Germany in the German form. That would be alles für Deutschland. That is quoting a Nazi slogan. And that is something you could actually go in jail for in Germany. It just happened recently, a few days ago, because a man said, why is it illegal to say everything for Germany when at the same time death to Germany is completely legal to say? He was actually taken to trial for that by German prosecutors and now faces a few months in prison for saying alles für Deutschland, everything for Germany. Coming to the foreign policy of Germany and the European Union, big things happened. The Tagesspiegel, a Berlin-based far-left newspaper, reports that Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz from the CDU declared on Monday that the weapons supplied by Germany to the Ukraine could be used to attack Russian territory now. This explicitly means the so-called Taurus cruise missiles that Germany is obviously dedicated to deliver to the Ukraine. The Russian reaction to this came swift and it is unambiguous. The Frankfurter Rundschau newspaper from Hesse says, in response to this statement, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Tsaikova spoke out sharply and accused Germany of putting itself in a hopeless situation. Quote, by lifting the restrictions on the scope of arms delivered to Ukraine, if there ever was such restriction, Berlin will only drive itself deeper into the hole in which the Kiev regime it supports has long found itself. She was quoted saying on Tuesday, according to reports by the Russian state news agency TASS, you can see that German Leopards, Cheetahs and Howitzers Taurus drones are burning like matchsticks, with the aforementioned being tank names from Germany. Well, Herman, obviously, Germany heavily escalated its already intense conflict with Russia there. Are they bound to actually go into direct hot war against Russia?
You know, it's a situation that I feel is getting more and more dangerous. And also, I cannot believe anybody with a sensible mind and also an interest in security of the country and securing the next generations would actually be so aggressive in the words. And if we look at Taurus, we have this discussion in Germany for, I would say, about 2 years. And I think since Donald Trump came into office, he said there's absolutely no way. Merz said the Germans will deliver these weapons to the Ukrainians, but little fact is we need American parts. And Donald Trump denied the delivery of the American parts into that Taurus. It's also a question, you know, who can fire these kind of weapons? It has to be a German soldier. It has to be somebody who's trained on this weapon system. So can you imagine how Russia would react if one of the Taurus actually hits anything in the territory of Russia, and then the Germans go like many times before, oh no, we're not part of this. We're just having a Ukraine friend, you know, driving or flying this F-16 or Tornado or wherever this Taurus can be launched, and then we are not part of it. I mean, this is so senseless how we do it. And our Chancellor Merz was just in the press and the media this morning saying, after weeks of diplomacy, we decided Putin does not want any, you know, war, any freedom discussion. We had years of possible diplomacy missed. We have not talked directly to them. We had somebody like Annalena Baerbock who actually declared Russia the war in just a UN setting. It is just mindless.
She did that, just for explanation, she did that and later spoke of a misunderstanding, a sort of a slip of words. She didn't mean to do that, but she explicitly declared war on Russia back then,
Yeah. And I think we're in a situation that obviously escalates more and more. If Merz or all the German politicians think we have here several large American air bases, so Russia will not fire back. One of the Russian military said already that we know where the Taurus is produced. It's in Schrobenhausen, which is near Munich. And our first launched rocket will hit this if you start shooting this towards Russia. And I would believe they can do it, because also I think we should not underestimate the capability of Russia. And at one point we should stop the escalation. And we are far over this point. And when I was at a left-wing government conference the last 2 days, everything is geared to war. And one of the Germans who basically I knew as a young man, and he always said, the only people who want war have never experienced war. And it's the same here. Merz let the Ukrainians die, he let the Russians die. Nobody's interested because they are not personally, affected.
Yeah. You just mentioned the former Foreign Secretary, Annalena Baerbock, and she is actually, by many critics, regarded to be in some way imbecile or mentally retarded, because not only that she declared war on Russia, she spoke of 360-degree turns that Vladimir Putin had to take to go to peace. She obviously meant 180 degrees, but so she may be smiled upon, but even her successor in office, Mr. Johann Wadepool, he was quoted recently by the Swiss news outlet Weltwoche with a line that has been quite famous ever since. He said, Russia, the now German Foreign Secretary said, Russia will always be an enemy and a threat to European security. So it seems, Herman, that this is more than just rhetoric and escalating there. They do actually seem to mean it, especially if we look at what Manfred Weber said. He is the so-called conservative head of the European Parliament. It's not a parliament, actually, because it lacks the rights of a parliament, but that is a different topic. He recently said that, or he called for a total conversion of Europe's economy to a, quote, war economy. So they actually seem to be quite dedicated to actually go to war.
Well, it's the only chance for Germany to survive economically, because they are denying any kind of new form of energy, of electricity. So we are out for AI, any kind of AI projects.
You're referring to the ban of nuclear energy and Russian gas.
Exactly. So what are Germans good at? We're good at manufacturing, machines. We have market leaders. We have Volkswagen. We have Mercedes-Benz, we have Porsche. All of them are shedding people. They are moving their production site outside. Also a success for Donald Trump, because most of these companies secretly build up their production either in Asia or straight into the US. So Trump is famous for many months ago saying the German car manufacturer will be American manufacturers soon. And he was right. And the leadership in Europe is so bad. And in Germany, I give you an example. When you just mentioned Manfred Weber, who's the so-called leader of the conservatives in Europe, we had another leader, which was Timmermans of the in American Democrats style policy in the EU. And when Ursula von der Leyen appeared the first time, the election was between Weber and Timmermans. And
that's Ursula von der Leyen being the president of the so-called European Commission. She calls herself the president of Europe, which she is not. She is not elected, and she is just the chairwoman of the bureaucracy called the European Commission, just for explanation of that, sir.
Yeah, but what I wanted to highlight is the Europeans had basically the chance to elect Weber or Timmermans, and they got Ursula von der Leyen without an election. She wasn't on the ballot. So you can see when they all call our democracy, there's something major wrong with it. And we see it in Romania, we see it in Slovakia, we see it in many areas now where they have to manipulate or actually eliminate elections. And that all ties into a big picture, I think, to support what they have done in terms of their policy, not taking responsibility, and for their own financial well-being. They rather start a war than actually saying, okay, our policy is so wrong. The majority of people in Europe doesn't want this. They don't want to be migrating to death. So we change it, or we actually step down. Nobody of them stepped down. We didn't have a step down in Germany for like 8 years now, I think.
And while they're obviously preparing for warfare in foreign aspects or on the outside, at the same time, the lawfare against political opposition within Germany seems to escalate. Privately owned news channel NTV reports that in the region of Saxony-Anhalt, 2 current and 1 former member of the oppositional AfD party now lose their right to own weapons following a court ruling. In this federal state alone, hundreds of other weapons are registered in the party environment or for members of the party. So this decision could soon have repercussions nationwide. And that is obviously what is planned, because the same report quotes Thomas Strobel, the Secretary of the Interior for the state of Baden-Württemberg. Strobel says, quote, "Weapons do not belong in the hands of enemies of our democracy." There's that word again, Herman, which you just quoted. So what they're doing here is they're banning members of the AfD and even supporters potentially to even own weapons, get hunting licenses, because they are calling them a threat to democracy. And just to reiterate that, 20% of German voters voted for this party. It's the strongest oppositional party in the German National Parliament. And these people are criminalized by the court system and by the ruling politicians at the same time.
That's absolutely right. First of all, we start again with who said this is, like you said, Strobel, who's married to the daughter of former Minister of Finance Schäuble. So basically, it's like, how would I say? You see the same in the Democratic Party, you same in the Republican Party. It's a club and you ain't in it. So they give their, son-in-law a certain kind of push into politics. He's now the Interior Minister of Baden-Württemberg. But what is more important is any country in the past that we have seen that was disarming their citizens had major wars afterwards. And so also looking at America and how the NRA defends the right to own a rifle, I mean, yes, control who has these weapons, but an absolutely denial and not having people able to defend themselves. And when we come back to what you started this podcast with, the stabbing bloodbath, here in Berlin, 16, 17-year-old girls are not even allowed to take pepper spray into the public transport. Pepper spray. If they get caught, they get fined. And I would say, how should they defend themselves in front of somebody who comes either with an intention to harm them or having a knife straight in their face, if you can't even have pepper spray? So you see, the whole political agenda is to disarm German people, to basically discredit German people, because everything when something happens to a migrant is the Germans. So basically they put it to everybody who is traditional German. And the question is, what is traditional German? I think everybody is German. Whoever came here, if it's Turks or Italians or Spanish in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it doesn't matter if they belong to the same value system. So I have great friends. I was at a hairdresser yesterday and he's Turkish. He's here since 1986. He's one of the most loveliest people because he runs his own business. He thinks like you and I. And there is no superiority in anybody in Germany. But the question is, are you coming here and what are you running from? If you run from huge Islamic influence and you come to Germany and establish an Islamic influence, actually is not the solution.
Well, too. And speaking about the weapons laws in Germany, those have always been extremely restrictive. There's no comparison to the United States. It has never been legal in Germany to own automatic firearms, for example. There always have been very, very strict limits on the number of weapons available to people. People always had to give a reason or prove a reason to the states why they need firearms. There is no right to bear arms in Germany comparable to the US Constitution. So the numbers of weapons available to Germans have always been very low, and they're actually planning to even restrict this further. And as you said, it is forbidden for people to take pepper spray on public transport. Actually, no joke, again, as a reaction to these stabbings on trains and in public places, the politicians actually regard a knife banning as the most important political measurement for that. And that is not joking. They are discussing Messerverbotszone, actually. So they're setting up knife banning zones around train stations, actually trying to make people believe that by outlawing knives there, they will see a decrease in the number of stabbings. No joke there and no pun there. At the same time, The ruling SPD and CDU parties are planning to extend Section 130 of the German criminal code, known as incitement to hatred. They plan that in future, statements made in, quote, non-public groups, so chat groups, for instance, are also to be covered by this criminal code. This would mean that potentially people that criticize Arab Muslims as being responsible for violence could be taken to court for doing so, even if they do that, for instance, in a closed chat group on WhatsApp or comparable. This is what the SPD and CDU call a necessary reform of the paragraph to stabilize their democracy. And Herman, you have just been to you call the left-wing event there, the Republika conference. We had a secretary there, I guess, who said that these kind of reforms of the criminal code and the regulation of online media are absolutely necessary, are vital to save our quote, or to save our democracy. Not a joke. Again. You've been there and actually heard that.
Absolutely. I actually took the task and went there for 2 days and listened to as many as I could. Basically, you could clearly see that the left is how intertwinkled it is into the German government. We have to say we have a new Minister of Finance who was a former Antifa member and also openly declares, Lars Klingbeil, he openly declares that he's proud to coming out of Antifa. So for the first time, we have this Antifa, this far left extremist, in charge of our finances. And funnily enough, before the election, the CDU, while fighting the SPD in the election, was asking 551 questions about NGOs, which Lars Klingbeil, as the Speaker of the Social Democrats, denied. And he basically said, you know, this is not a question that we have to fund this kind of NGOs, given that his wife runs one of the NGOs affected with a large amount of government sponsoring. So also here you can clearly see, like US aid, we have an enormous budget deficit in Germany in terms of we cannot put our household together in terms of spending and in terms of financing. And the reason is we need a German Doge. We have possibly the same problems that money is going to groups that we actually, when it comes to light, won't like.
Highly likely, but from what we actually know and what is proven, one could suspect that because, for instance, the Brandenburg State Office for the so-called Protection of the Constitution, the Verfassungsschutz, that's the domestic intelligence service, it actually operates 287 fake accounts on different social media platforms to observe and spy on the aforementioned AfD, oppositional party. Brandenburg's State Office for the Protection of the Constitution is officially involved in the political fight against the largest constitutional party. That may come as a surprise to international viewers because in Germany that is not only legal, Herman, but that is the actual task that the Verfassungsschutz is given. It's officially the secret police to battle any political group that the ruling party claims to be a threat to Germany's constitution.
100%. It's part of the strategy. I mean, they have their, when you say Verfassungsschutz and domestic secret service, so to say, they report into the Ministry of Interior. And we know our former Minister for Interior is also far, far left and very aggressive left.
Nancy Faeser.
And what we see out of this is that everybody who voices conservative ideas, which was about 20 years ago in Germany, the absolutely middle of the consent. We are a conservative country. And now everybody states that the Islam belongs to Germany and the migration is good for Germany. All these words now claim they are in the middle of society. And once again, looking at the German history, the majority of people is just lethargic. I think the Germans are so much under pressure, but also they love to be ruled. For one reason or the other, they are always looking for somebody who does something for them. And the same thesis was the last 2 days on this left government conference. I mean, we had the new Ministry of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he openly claimed he comes from a state of Schleswig-Holstein, way north in Germany, and he said, we have a successful black-green government, so conservative and green government. This in one sentence is impossible, because the foundation of being conservative does always collide with the foundation of being green. And that has nothing to do with the priority of climate change or, looking at the environment, nothing. It's a pure thinking of how do I keep my power structure? Do I have to coalition with the Greens? Then I do it, because also the Conservative Party, CDU, specifically said we are not doing anything with the far left, which is the follower out of the SED, out of
former
basically
GDR,
the Eastern
ruling tyranny party of the GDR, yeah.
Yeah, the ruling tyranny party of the GDR. So that's what we hope to get rid of. And now they're just throwing it overboard just to deny the biggest opposition party, AfD. And once again, you can think about the AfD whatever you want. But if you are a Democrat, and these words were used massively the last 2 days in this conference, we are Democrats, we are Democrats. No, you are a Democrat when you accept that 20% of the people have a different opinion about their future than you do. And that is the main problem of Germany right now. And I can't really see how we are changing this, to be honest.
No, we're not. We're heading in that direction with full speed. And as I said, Germany's governments on the national and on the state level, they use their domestic intelligence services to spy on oppositional party members and also on oppositional or critical journalists such as ourselves. We both know that our phones are tapped by the domestic intelligence service. This domestic intelligence service goes so far as to actually ring up banks of people they target, telling them or spreading rumors about possible money laundering, having bank accounts canceled. We have a long list of German journalists or political activists who actually have this problem, experienced it in the past. You, as a person who's still very active in Germany, who's still invited to these events, who's still on the floor to gather information, choose to not uncover your face on public television because of that reason, and also know that you are followed by the domestic intelligence wherever you go. So that is a proven fact in present-day Germany.
Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. And also, would I get invitations to stuff that we talk about? No. If they would know exactly who I am, I'm not really important, to be honest, but I have a very long history of being in German banking. I used to work in New York and in London and in Dublin and wherever. So from that respect, basically they look at me and they say, oh yeah, he's a good, facilitator, and sometimes I even have to contribute something. But would I get invited to these events? No, because like the last 2 days, there was absolutely nobody who could take any word of contradiction and say, guys, we are way too far left here. We need to move towards the middle. And the reason why I'm doing this with you is basically, I think I just want to do whatever I can do to kind of have the youth coming up and the next generation having a chance like I do. Because when I was young, I could go to Frankfurt, I could go to London, I could fly to New York and just apply for a job. And I think looking at what the German democracy
our democracy
in Eastern Germany was, I wouldn't be allowed today. And I just basically want to have people get the chance in their life to do something, and I adhere to the American kind of values, free speech and the Constitution. And that is it. That's what we do.
That is a threat to our democracy there. Just careful with what you say. And when it comes to chances of the youth in Germany, there's another big issue there. The fact that Germany is doing everything to kill its energy supplies these days. US President Donald Trump just declared a nuclear renaissance age in the United States with massive investments into nuclear energy. Germany officially left or gave up nuclear energy a couple of months ago after former Chancellor Merkel decided that it needs to do this. And now Germany gives up its resistance to pro-nuclear course, reports German state news outlet Tagesschau. They say the German government has taken a step towards France in a long-standing dispute over EU funding for nuclear power. On the fringes of a meeting of EU competition ministers in Brussels, Federal Economic Minister Katharina Reiche from CDU expressed her openness to funding research into so-called small modular reactors from the EU budget. Germany had previously rejected this, but she says now it's about promoting new technologies. But, Herman, the big joke here, the pun being that this funding of nuclear research is restricted to non-German countries, or to all countries except Germany. So Germany's government now officially funds nuclear energies for other countries, but bans them for being engaged in Germany. Is that correct?
That's how you have to view it. Absolutely. You know, I mean, if you hear this, what else do you want to say? It's part of the deindustrialization of Germany, and that is in full swing. And that means you can have initiatives, whatever you want. And I give you an example. A friend of mine lives in Abu Dhabi, and he always reports, because he's very close to the leadership there. And he always says the French are here every couple of weeks, and they are very interested in how we develop, and they tell us what they are planning, what they are doing. The Germans come once or twice a year, and they absolutely show us what we have to do. So the German feeling of being superior and telling the world to follow them in kind of energy, they start laughing. And also the result is Abu Dhabi invested 50 billion euros in a French artificial intelligence initiative and zero in Germany. Why? Because the French have nuclear energy. So they can say whatever you come and need in terms of electricity and energy, we can provide it, and the Germans can't. So really, I mean, that is the simplest example I can think of the second question should be, if you go out, and Ursula von der Leyen is very good in reading this, you know, Hunger Games style, you know, announcement and saying, now we want to be the leader in AI. And the Germans, you know, do this and they do that. No, maybe the rest of Europe can, but also looking how dependent the energy and the energy grid is. You know, it's sooner or later what we've seen in Spain and Portugal, that people are without energy for quite a while, will happen to Germany one day or the other as well.
There was just a few weeks ago a major blackout that actually affected the whole of the Iberian Peninsula. Spain and Portugal completely lost their electricity for 6 hours, and in some regions there, complete blackout. And even so, what you just mentioned is actually true. Ursula von der Leyen just recently gave out a program called Choose Europe to start and grow, saying that they launched the EU startup and scale-up strategy to help tech-driven companies grow, compete globally, and thrive in Europe. That is, again, not sarcasm, that is official politics by the European Commission. And while they are doing that, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, on the aforementioned left-wing event, doubled down on the fact that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which had been delivering very cheap Russian gas to Germany, will, as quote, never again be opened up. He said he will do everything in his power to make sure that this pipeline will never be available again to deliver Russian gas to Germany. Guys, thank you, Herman, and thank you out there. This wraps up this issue of EuroWars. Join us next week for your breakdown on politics and money in the deep state hellhole that is the so-called European Union.